Francesca Hilton was born with two names that should have protected her. On one side, she was a Hilton, the daughter of Conrad Hilton, the man who built one of the most powerful hotel empires in the world. His name was written across grand buildings, luxury rooms, and a fortune so large that most people could only imagine it. On the other side, she was the daughter of Zsa Zsa Gabor, one of Hollywood's most glamorous women, a socialite, actress, and celebrity whose beauty and personality made her unforgettable. From the outside, Francesca's life should have looked like a fairy tale. She was connected to money, fame, hotels, movie stars, society parties, and old Hollywood glamour. She belonged to a family name that would later become even more famous through Paris Hilton. She was not born into ordinary struggle. She was born into a world where fortunes were made, headlines were printed, and the rich seemed untouchable. But Francesca Hilton's life did not become a fairy tale. It became a warning, because by the end of her life, the daughter of Conrad Hilton and Zsa Zsa Gabor was reportedly struggling so badly that she had lived between short-term rentals and her car. The woman who carried one of the richest surnames in America died poor, lonely, and almost forgotten. She passed away in 2015 from complications of a stroke, far from the comfort and security people would expect from someone born into such a dynasty. And perhaps the most painful detail of all was this. Her mother, Zsa Zsa Gabor, was reportedly never told that her only daughter had died. That single detail captures the tragedy of Francesca Hilton's life. She was surrounded by famous people, but often seemed emotionally abandoned. She came from wealth, but did not inherit real security. She had a glamorous mother and a billionaire father, but somehow she still ended up fighting for a place in both families. To understand how that happened, we have to go back long before Francesca's final years. Her story begins with Conrad Hilton, a man who rose from modest beginnings and turned a small hotel opportunity into a business empire. He was ambitious, disciplined, and determined to make his family name mean something across America and eventually across the world. But the same man who could build hotels, survive financial disaster, and protect a business empire was far more complicated when it came to love, marriage, and family. Then came Zsa Zsa Gabor. When she entered Conrad's life, she was beautiful, foreign, glamorous, and desperate to build a new future in America after escaping the chaos spreading across Europe. To the public, their marriage may have looked like a perfect union between money and beauty, a powerful hotel magnate and a dazzling Hollywood woman. But behind the polished image, the marriage was already cracking. Zsa Zsa later described a relationship where she felt controlled, diminished, and stripped of her identity. She claimed Conrad even tried to change her name, calling her Georgia instead of Zsa Zsa, as if the woman he married had to be reshaped into someone else. And before their marriage finally ended, one child was born from that broken union, Francesca. Her birth should have been the beginning of a protected life. Instead, it connected her forever to two powerful people who would give her fame, scandal, and pain, but never the peace she needed. Francesca Hilton came into the world as an heiress, but the truth is, she would spend much of her life trying to prove that she belonged. Long before Francesca Hilton was born, the Hilton name was not a symbol of celebrity scandal. It was the name of a man trying to build something permanent. Conrad Hilton came from a family that had worked hard for everything it had. His father, Augustus Halverson Hilton, had immigrated from Norway to the American Southwest in the late 1800s, bringing with him the hopes of many immigrants who believed that America could offer a better life. Conrad grew up in New Mexico, but in those early years, New Mexico was not even a state yet. It was still a territory, a place where ambition could move faster than tradition. Conrad was not born into the empire he later controlled. He had to build it. At first, he tried politics. He became one of New Mexico's early Republican representatives, but the world of government disappointed him quickly. He hated the slow decisions, the deals behind closed doors, and the feeling that nothing truly moved unless someone was willing to play dirty. Politics did not suit him. Conrad wanted something he could shape with his own hands, so he turned toward business. During the Texas oil boom, he originally hoped to buy a bank. Oil money was flowing, fortunes were being made, and Conrad believed banking could be his way into wealth. But when that plan failed, he changed direction. Instead of buying a bank, he bought a hotel. It was the Mobley Hotel in Cisco, Texas, a modest building with 40 rooms. But those 40 rooms taught Conrad something that would change his life forever. Workers, oilmen, travelers, and businessmen were constantly coming and going. Rooms could be rented again and again. Beds could turn into profit. A hotel was not just a building. It was a machine for money. Conrad saw the future. He bought the Mobley in 1919, and within years, he was expanding across Texas. Then came the Great Depression, the financial disaster that ruined countless businesses across America. People stopped spending. Banks failed. Families lost everything. A hotel empire could have collapsed overnight. But Conrad held on. He survived the Depression, protected what he could, and slowly began to grow again. By the 1940s, the Hilton name was no longer just a regional business. It was becoming a symbol of American success. Conrad was not satisfied with owning hotels in one state, or even one country. He wanted the Hilton name to stretch across the world. But while Conrad was building his public empire, his private life was far less controlled. His first marriage to Adelaide Barron gave him 3 sons, Conrad Jr., known as Nicky, Barron, and Eric. But the marriage ended in divorce. Conrad spent years rebuilding himself emotionally and financially before he turned his attention to a woman who was unlike anyone else in his world, Zsa Zsa Gabor. She had arrived in America from Hungary, escaping the fear and violence spreading across Europe. She was beautiful, charming, dramatic, and impossible to ignore. To many people, she looked like the perfect match for a wealthy, powerful man like Conrad Hilton. He had money and status. She had glamour and star quality. At first, Conrad may have seemed like a rescuer. He even helped members of Zsa Zsa's family escape Hungary. But the marriage that looked dazzling from the outside became suffocating behind closed doors. Zsa Zsa later described Conrad as controlling. She said he did not simply want to love her, he wanted to possess her. He even insisted on calling her Georgia instead of Zsa Zsa, as if her name, her roots, and her identity had to be erased to fit the image he wanted. For a woman who had already escaped one world of fear, the marriage became another kind of prison. Zsa Zsa later wrote that her own needs were ignored, and that being married to Conrad meant the end of her freedom. The glamorous photographs may have shown diamonds, parties, and society smiles, but behind them was a woman who felt trapped by a man who was used to getting his way. Their marriage began to fall apart quickly, and just before the divorce was finalized, Zsa Zsa gave birth to Conrad's only daughter. Francesca Hilton entered the world at the center of beauty, power, money, and resentment. Her father was building a dynasty. Her mother was becoming a legend. But the marriage that produced her was already broken beyond repair. From the very beginning, Francesca was not simply born into wealth. She was born into conflict. Francesca Hilton was born in March 1947, only months before her parents' divorce became final. From the moment she entered the world, her life was tied to a marriage that had already collapsed. Conrad Hilton and Zsa Zsa Gabor were not two loving parents preparing to raise a child together. They were two powerful personalities moving in different directions, carrying resentment, pain, and very different versions of the same story. For Zsa Zsa, Francesca's birth was surrounded by darkness. In her later writings, she made a disturbing allegation about the encounter that led to her daughter's conception, claiming it was not something she had consented to. That allegation gave Francesca's origin a painful shadow, as if even her beginning had been marked by conflict between the two people who gave her life. By October 1947, Conrad and Zsa Zsa's divorce was finalized. Francesca was still a baby, but already she belonged to a broken family. Her mother moved forward into the world that would make her famous. Zsa Zsa Gabor became one of Hollywood's most recognizable women, glamorous, witty, dramatic, and endlessly talked about. She appeared in films and television, married again and again, and built a public image around beauty, diamonds, charm, and scandal. She was the kind of woman newspapers loved to write about, because every part of her life seemed larger than ordinary life. But being the daughter of someone so famous did not mean Francesca had a peaceful childhood. Zsa Zsa's world was unstable. Her marriages kept changing. Men came and went. The house, the headlines, the social circles, and the family structure never seemed fully settled. Francesca would eventually have several stepfathers, and each new marriage added another layer of complication to her already unusual life. On her father's side, things were no simpler. Conrad Hilton had other children from his first marriage, and his sons were much closer to the business legacy he was building. His oldest son, Nicky Hilton, became famous for all the wrong reasons. He had money, status, and charm, but his life was filled with reckless behavior, drinking, gambling, failed relationships, and scandal. His marriage to Elizabeth Taylor looked like a Hollywood dream at first. She was young, beautiful, and already adored by the public. But behind the glamour, the marriage became a nightmare. Nicky's temper and destructive habits damaged the relationship so badly that it ended in less than a year. This was the family Francesca was born into. A father building a global empire, a mother becoming a Hollywood legend, a half-brother turning the family name into scandal, and a child left somewhere in the middle. Francesca carried two famous names, but fame did not give her stability. She had access to glamour, but glamour was not the same as love. She had wealthy parents, but wealth was not the same as protection. As she grew older, Francesca would understand something painful. Being connected to powerful people did not mean those people would fight for her. She was a Hilton by blood. She was Zsa Zsa Gabor's only daughter. But in both families, Francesca often seemed to stand at the edge of the room, close enough to see the fortune, the fame, and the attention, but never close enough to truly feel safe inside it. For most people, the Hilton name meant wealth that could never run out. By the time Conrad Hilton reached the final chapter of his life, he had built far more than a hotel business. He had built a dynasty. His name was attached to luxury, power, and international success. The small hotel he had once bought in Texas had grown into something almost unimaginable. A global empire with the Hilton name shining across cities, countries, and continents. But Conrad was not only thinking about business, he was thinking about legacy. And in families like the Hiltons, legacy can become more dangerous than money itself. Conrad's eldest son, Nicky, had already died before him. Nicky's wild life, failed marriages, drinking, gambling, and reckless habits had made him a painful warning inside the family. He had once been given responsibility in the Hilton business, but he never became the stable heir Conrad needed. His death at only 42 left behind a shadow over the family name. That left Conrad's surviving children, including his sons Baron and Eric, and his only daughter, Francesca. Baron Hilton was the son who seemed most capable of carrying the empire forward. Unlike Nicky, Baron had discipline. He understood business. He had spent years working inside the Hilton world and proving that he could protect what his father had created. If Conrad wanted the family name to remain powerful, Baron appeared to be the safest choice. But when Conrad Hilton died in 1979 at the age of 91, his will shocked the family. He did not leave the majority of his fortune directly to his children. Instead, Conrad left most of his estate to the charitable foundation he had created decades earlier. Reports say that nearly 97% of his wealth went to the Conrad N. Hilton Foundation. To the outside world, it may have looked noble, a rich man choosing charity over family greed. But inside the family, the decision created anger, confusion, and years of legal fighting. Conrad had not completely ignored Baron. His will reportedly gave Baron the right to buy back millions of Hilton Hotel shares from the foundation, which could keep control of the company within the family. But the foundation did not want to give up those shares. A long legal battle followed, dragging the Hilton fortune into probate and keeping the family locked in conflict for years. Eventually, Barron won. By the time the court ruled in his favor in 1988, the value of those shares had grown enormously. Barron had continued running the business successfully, and the victory helped him protect his position inside the Hilton empire. But Francesca's story was very different. Conrad Hilton did leave something to his only daughter, but compared to the size of the fortune, it felt almost insulting. Francesca received only $100,000. For a normal person, that amount would have been life-changing. But for the daughter of Conrad Hilton, born into one of America's richest families, it felt like rejection written in legal language. Francesca was furious. She believed her father owed her more. She challenged the will, hoping the courts would give her a larger share of the fortune. But her fight failed. The court ruled against her, and Francesca was forced to accept the original amount. That moment became one of the great wounds of her life. While Barron continued to rise, and while the Hilton name remained attached to hotels, money, and success, Francesca was left feeling pushed aside. Perhaps Conrad assumed she would one day inherit money from her mother's side of the family. Perhaps he believed the foundation mattered more than personal inheritance. Perhaps he simply did not see Francesca as someone who belonged at the center of the Hilton legacy. Whatever his reason was, the result was devastating. Francesca had been born into a world of impossible wealth, but when the fortune was divided, she discovered how little power her famous surname truly gave her. She was Conrad Hilton's only daughter, but in the will that shaped the family's future, she became almost an afterthought. After losing the fight over her father's will, Francesca Hilton's life never seemed to fully recover. She had been born between two famous worlds, but neither world gave her the security people expected. The Hilton fortune had moved forward without her. Her half-brother Barron had protected his place in the family empire, while the Hilton name continued to grow in power, fame, and value. On her mother's side, Zsa Zsa Gabor remained a symbol of Hollywood glamour, diamonds, beauty, and scandal. But Francesca was not living inside that glamour. She was living in its shadow. For years, she tried to build her own identity. She worked as an actress and comedian, and she carried her famous surname with a mixture of pride and pain. But fame did not come to her in the same way it had come to her mother, and wealth did not follow her in the way people might have assumed. Then, in 2002, tragedy struck Zsa Zsa Gabor. A serious car accident left her badly injured, and from that point on, her health began to decline. The once dazzling socialite, known for her sharp wit and glamorous public life, became increasingly fragile. As Zsa Zsa's condition worsened, control over her life and estate became one of the most painful battles Francesca would ever face. At the center of that battle was Zsa Zsa's final husband, Friedrich Prinz von Anhalt. Francesca and von Anhalt had a deeply troubled relationship. He accused her of trying to use her mother's property for personal gain and interfering with her mother's will. Lawsuits followed, but when Zsa Zsa did not appear in court, those claims were eventually dropped. Still, the damage between Francesca and her stepfather only grew worse. By 2012, Zsa Zsa's health had deteriorated so badly that she could no longer truly manage her own life. Francesca went to court, trying to establish an independent conservatorship for her mother. It may have been partly about protecting Zsa Zsa, and partly about Francesca trying to regain some control in a family story where she had been pushed aside again and again. But once more, Francesca lost. The court allowed von Anhalt to remain in control, leaving Francesca outside the circle of power around her own mother. It was a devastating repeat of the same pattern that had followed her for decades. Her father's fortune had slipped beyond her reach. Now her mother's care, home, and estate were also controlled by someone else. By the final years of her life, Francesca's situation had become heartbreaking. Reports suggested that despite being the daughter of Conrad Hilton and Zsa Zsa Gabor, she was struggling financially. Some reports even claimed she had been homeless shortly before her death, living between short-term rentals and her car. It was almost impossible to believe. A Hilton daughter, a Gabor daughter, a woman born beside money, beauty, and fame. And yet, in the end, she had almost nothing. In January 2015, Francesca Hilton died from complications of a stroke. She was 67 years old. But the tragedy did not end with her death. According to reports, her mother was never told that Francesca had died. Zsa Zsa Gabor was still alive, but her health was so fragile that von Anhalt chose not to tell her. So the glamorous mother and the forgotten daughter were separated, even in the final chapter. Francesca Hilton's life remains one of the saddest stories attached to the Hilton name. She was born into a dynasty, but never seemed to belong inside it. She inherited fame without protection, scandal without comfort, and a famous surname that could open headlines but could not save her. In the end, Francesca Hilton was not remembered as a hotel heiress who had everything. She was remembered as the daughter of two legends who somehow died almost completely alone.